The air in Hollow Pines carried a perpetual chill, even in the heart of summer. Nestled between jagged cliffs and a restless sea, the small coastal town was a patchwork of weathered clapboard houses and winding cobblestone streets, their stones slick with mist that rolled in each dawn. Gulls cried overhead, their calls blending with the distant crash of waves against the rocks below. It was a place that felt alive, yet frozen in time, where secrets seemed to cling to the salt-stained walls like barnacles. Lila Carver stood at the edge of her porch, clutching a chipped mug of coffee that had long gone cold. At 32, she was a fixture in Hollow Pines dependable, quiet, the kind of woman who'd mend a neighbor's fence or leave a basket of apples on a widow's doorstep without a word. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose braid, strands escaping to frame a face etched with sleepless nights. She'd built a life here, after leaving the city 5 years ago, trading the chaos of skyscrapers for the steady rhythm of the tides. The townsfolk liked her well enough, though they whispered she carried a shadow she never spoke of. That morning, the shadow found her. It started with the envelope slipped under her doorknob stamp, no return address, just her name scrawled in a jagged hand. Lila. Inside was a single photograph, creased and yellowed at the edges. It showed her standing in a city alley, laughing, her arm looped around a man with sharp cheekbones and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Theo. Her stomach lurched. She hadn't seen him since the night she'd fled, leaving behind a life she'd torched to ashes. At the bottom of the photo, written in red ink, were 3 words: I found you. Lila's breath hitched as she scanned the empty street beyond her porch. The town was waking old Mister. Hensley shuffled toward the pier with his fishing pole, and the bakery's chimney puffed sweet smoke into the gray sky, but it felt different now, like the air itself was watching her. She shoved the photo into her pocket and retreated inside, locking the door with trembling hands. The house smelled of cedar and yesterday's bread, a comfort that now felt hollow. She didn't have long to process it. A knock rattled the door sharp, insistent. Lila froze, her pulse hammering. Who's there? She called, her voice steadier than she felt. Lila, it's me, came a muffled reply. She recognized the Rasputin, the town's handyman and her closest friend. She cracked the door, peering out. Jonah stood there, all 6 feet of him, his flannel shirt dusted with sawdust, and his hazel eyes narrowed with worry. His sandy hair was mussed, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. You okay? He asked, stepping closer. Saw you out there looking like you'd seen a ghost. I'm fine, she lied, forcing a smile. Just didn't sleep well. He didn't buy it. She could tell from the way his jaw tightened, but he nodded anyway. Well, I've got something for you. Found it in the shed when I was fixing Mrs. Perry's roof. He held out a small wooden box, its lid carved with swirling vines. It's got your name on it. Lila's blood ran cold. She hadn't owned anything like that, not here. She took it with unsteady hands, the wood smooth and cool against her skin. Thanks, she muttered, avoiding his gaze. Want me to stick around? Jonah asked, lingering. You seem off. No, I've got it, she said too quickly. He hesitated, then tipped his head and left, his boots crunching on the gravel path. Alone again, Lila set the box on her kitchen table, the photo burning a hole in her pocket. She lifted the lid. Inside was a single item, a tarnished silver key, small enough to fit a lockbox or a diary. Attached to it was a folded note. Her fingers shook as she opened it, revealing a message in the same jagged script as the photo. Check the cliffs at dusk. Come alone. Her mind raced. Theo was here, or someone who knew him was. The past she'd buried was clawing its way up, and now it had a key, a box, a time. She glanced out the window at the cliffs, looming in the distance, their edges shrouded in fog. Whatever waited there, it wasn't a coincidence. It was a summons. As the day bled into evening, Lila made her choice. She grabbed her coat, slipped the key into her pocket next to the photo, and stepped into the gathering dusk. The wind howled as she climbed the narrow path to the cliffs, the sea roaring below. At the top, a figure stood silhouetted against the fading light, tall, motionless, facing away. Her heart thudded as she called out, "Theo?" The figure turned, and the world tilted. It wasn't Theo. It was a woman, her face obscured by a hood, holding something glinting in her hand, a second key, identical to Lila's. "You're late," she said, her voice low and unfamiliar. "And you're not the only one he's hunting." Before Lila could respond, a sharp crack split the air, a gunshot echoing off the rocks. The woman flinched, grabbing Lila's arm. "Run!" she hissed, pulling her toward the edge as footsteps thundered closer. The cliffs of hollow pines loomed like sentinels as Lila stumbled forward, the stranger's grip iron tight on her arm. The gunshot still rang in her ears, a violent punctuation to the fog-choked dusk. Her boots slipped on the damp stone. The seas roared below, a constant threat as the path narrowed. The woman ahead moved with purpose, her hooded figure cutting through the mist like a blade. Lila's mind spun. Theo, the photo, the key, and now this. Who was this woman, and why did she have a matching key? "Keep up," the woman snapped, her voice edged with urgency. She didn't look back, her free hand clutching the glinting silver twin to Lila's own key. Behind them, the crunch of boots on gravel grew louder, closer. Whoever had fired that shot wasn't slowing down. Lila's breath burned in her chest as they veered off the main trail, ducking into a tangle of gnarled pines that clawed at her coat. The air smelled of salt and resin, thick with the promise of rain. They crouched behind a fallen log, the woman's hood slipping just enough to reveal sharp green eyes and a scar tracing her jaw. She pressed a finger to her lips, her gaze darting toward the path they'd abandoned. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, a shadow passed a man, broad-shouldered and deliberate, his silhouette framed by the dying light. He carried a rifle, its barrel catching the last glint of sun. Lila's stomach twisted. She didn't recognize him, but the way he moved, methodical and unhurried, sent a chill deeper than the wind. He paused, head tilting as if listening, then continued down the cliffside, vanishing into the fog. The woman exhaled, loosening her grip on Lila's arm. "He's not done," she muttered, more to herself than to Lila. She straightened, brushing dirt from her knees. "We've got a head start, that's all." "Who are you?" Lila demanded, her voice hoarse. "And who the hell was that?" The woman's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Name's Mara. As for him..." She hesitated, her eyes flickering with something dark, fear, maybe, or regret. "Let's just say he's a collector, and we're holding what he wants." Lila pulled the key from her pocket, holding it up. "This? What does it open? And why does it have my name on it?" Mara mirrored her, revealing her own key. Two halves of a whole. They unlocked something Theo left behind, something worth killing for. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You thought you could run from him, didn't you? So did I. But he's not the one pulling the strings anymore." Lila's heart stuttered. "Theo's dead?" "Not yet," Mara said cryptically. "But he's not here. That man is. And he's not the only one coming." Before Lila could press further, Mara turned, motioning toward a faint trail snaking deeper into the woods. "There's a cabin half a mile in. It's safe for now. We need to figure out what these keys fit before they find us." Lila followed, her mind a storm of questions. The cabin emerged from the trees like a ghost-sagging roof, boarded windows, a relic of some forgotten fisherman. Inside, it smelled of mildew and dust. The single room lit by a kerosene lamp Mara lit with practiced ease. A rickety table held a scattering of papers, a map of hollow pines marked with red X's, and Lila's breath caught a photo of her and Theo, identical to the one under her door, pinned to a corkboard. Mara noticed her staring. "He's been watching you longer than you think," she said, tapping the photo. "Me too. That's how I knew where to find you." Lila's hands clenched. "I left him 5 years ago, burned every bridge. Why now?" Mara pulled a folded letter from her coat, sliding it across the table. "Because of this." The paper was crisp, dated 2 weeks ago, addressed to Mara in Theo's looping script. Lila scanned it. They're closing in. The keys are with you and her. Hollow Pines. Don't trust anyone. A second page. Crumpled and stained. Listed numbers coordinates maybe. Or a code and a single line. 10 million reasons to stay alive. 10 million, Lila whispered, her voice trembling. What did he do? Mara leaned back, her expression grim. Theo didn't just break hearts. He broke banks. Stole from people who don't forgive. That's what the keys unlock, a fortune he hid before they caught up to him. And now they're after us. A thud outside jolted them both. The lamp flickered as a shadow passed the window, too tall, too still to be the wind. Mara grabbed the rifle, leaning against the wall, her knuckles white. They're here, she hissed. Get the map. We're not staying. Lila snatched the papers, her pulse racing as Mara edged toward the door. It burst open before she reached it, revealing not the man from the cliffs, but John, sweaty, breathless, a crowbar in his hand. Lila, thank God, he panted. I heard the shot. Mara leveled the rifle at him. Who are you? She barked. He's a friend, Lila said quickly, stepping between them. Jonah, how'd you find me? Saw you head up the cliffs, he said, eyeing Mara warily. Then I heard the gun. I wasn't leaving you out here. Mara didn't lower the weapon. Convenient timing, she muttered. You trust him? Lila hesitated, her gaze flicking to Jonah's familiar face, steady, earnest. Yeah, she said finally. I do. Before Mara could argue, a low whistle cut through the night sharp, deliberate, coming from the trees. The collector was back, and he wasn't alone. Mara cursed, shoving the lamp off the table to plunge them into darkness. Out the back, she whispered. Now. They bolted, the cabin's rear door creaking as they slipped into the woods. Behind them, voices rose calm, coordinated, closing in. Lila clutched the map, the keys digging into her palm, as a single thought burned through her fear. Jonah had found her too easily, too perfectly. The forest swallowed them whole, a labyrinth of twisted pines and shadowed hollows, where the mist hung thick as a shroud. Lila's boots sank into the mossy earth, each step a gamble against roots and unseen drops. Mara led the way, her rifle slung over her shoulder, the map now tucked into her coat. Jonah stayed close to Lila, his crowbar gripped like a lifeline, his breathing ragged but steady. The whistle from the cabin lingered in the air behind them, a predator's call answered by the snap of twigs and the murmur of voice too many, too near. Lila's mind churned as they moved. Jonah's arrival gnawed at her. He'd always been there when she needed him, fixing her leaky roof, sharing coffee on quiet mornings, but tonight felt different. His explanation rang hollow against the stakes unfolding around her. $10 million. Theo's betrayal. Keys to a fortune. And now a man with a rifle hunting them through the dark. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, yet Jonah's presence was a tether to the life she'd built in Hollow Pines. She stole a glance at him, his jaw set, eyes scanning the trees. Friend or liability? She couldn't decide. Down here, Mara hissed, veering toward a ravine where a creek cut through the stone, its water black and glassy under the moon. They slid down the embankment, pebbles skittering into the stream. The cold bit through Lila's jeans as they crouched behind a slab of granite, the sound of pursuit fading into the wind's howl. For a moment, there was only their breathing and the gurgle of the creek. Mara unfolded the map, her fingers tracing the red X's. One's close, she said, nodding toward a ridge half a mile east. If Theo hid something, it's there. We need to move before they box us in. What's the plan? Jonah asked, his voice low. You've got a gun, but there's at least 3 of them. Maybe more. Mara's eyes flicked to him, cold and appraising. We don't fight unless we have to. The keys are what matter. Get to the cache, get out. She paused, studying him. You're handy with that crowbar, or just here to slow us down? He's with me. Lila cut in, sharper than she meant. He stays. Mara shrugged, but the tension lingered. Your call. Let's go. They climbed the ridge in silence, the air growing thinner as the trees parted. At the top, a jagged outcrop overlooked the sea, waves crashing white against the rocks below. One of the X's marked this spot a shallow cave carved into the cliff face, its entrance half hidden by brambles. Mara knelt, brushing aside thorns, and revealed a rusted metal box embedded in the stone. Two keyholes stared back, side by side. Lila's pulse quickened. She handed Mara her key, and they inserted them together. The locks clicked, a sound swallowed by the wind, and the lid creaked open. Inside was no fortuno, stacks of cash or glittering jewels, but a leather pouch and a folded note. Mara tipped the pouch into her palm, revealing a handful of diamonds, small but flawless, their facets catching the moonlight. The note, in Theo's hand, read, "First step. The rest is deeper. Trust no one." "Deeper," Lila muttered, frustration boiling over. "What does that even mean?" "It's a game," Mara said, pocketing the diamonds. "He's baiting user them. The real prize is somewhere else." Jonah shifted, peering over the cliff's edge. "Whatever it is, we're out of time. Look." Below, flashlight beams sliced through the fog 3, maybe 4, sweeping the ravine they'd left behind. The voices were clearer now, clipped and professional. "Spread out. They're close." Mara cursed under her breath. "We can't outrun them forever. We need a play." Lila's eyes darted to Jonah. "You know these woods better than anyone. Is there a way out?" He nodded, pointing north. "Old logging trail. Runs parallel to the coast, loops back to town. If we're fast, we can lose them. Or lead them straight to us." Mara countered, her tone icy. "How do we know you're not part of this?" Jonah's face hardened. "If I were, I wouldn't be running with you. I'd be holding the gun." "Enough," Lila snapped, the pressure cracking her restraint. "We go with the trail. It's our shot." Mara relented, though her grip on the rifle tightened. They descended the ridge, the logging trail a faint scar through the undergrowth. The diamonds weighed heavy in Mara's pocket, the note a riddle in Lila's mind. Theo's word stress no one echoed with every step. Sewing deck couldn't shake. Halfway down the trail, Jonah stopped abruptly, his hand raised. "Wait," he whispered. Ahead, a figure blocked the path, not the broad-shouldered collector, but a woman, petite and wiry, her face obscured by a scarf. She held no weapon, just stood there, watching. The flashlight beams behind them flickered closer. "Who are you?" Lila called, her voice trembling but firm. The woman tilted her head, her voice soft yet piercing. "Someone who knows what Theo took, and who he took it from." She stepped forward, revealing a third key dangling from her neck. "You've got two. I've got the last. We can end this or they will." A shout rang out from the ravine, too close. The woman's eyes widened. "Decide fast," she said, turning to vanish into the trees. Mara raised her rifle, but Lila grabbed her arm. "Wait, she's not shooting at us. She might be our way out." "Or a trap," Jonah said, his voice tight. "Lila, we can't trust her." The beams converged, voices barking orders. Time was up. Lila looked between Mara's steely resolve and Jonah's pleading gaze. The third key's promise dangling in the dark. "Follow her," Lila said, the words tasting like a gamble. "It's all we've got." They plunged after the woman, the forest closing in as the hunters' lights burned brighter at their backs. The forest thickened as Lila, Mara, and Jonah chased the fleeting shadow of the woman with the third key. Branches clawed at their faces, the air heavy with pine and the metallic tang of an approaching storm. The flashlight beams behind them danced like hounds on a scent. Their pursuers' voices growing sharper commands barked in clipped tones, boots pounding the earth. Lila's legs burned, but adrenaline kept her moving, the stranger's words looping in her head. "We can end this or they will." The woman darted ahead, a wraith in the gloom, her scarf trailing like a flag. She didn't look back, didn't slow, leading them deeper into the tangled heart of Hollow Pines wilderness. The trail widened briefly, then plunged into a gully where a rusted footbridge spanned a rushing stream. She crossed it in 3 strides, pausing on the far side to glance back. Her eyes, visible now in the faint moonlight, were wide and urgent. "Hurry," she called, her voice cutting through the wind. Then she was gone again, vanishing into a copse of skeletal birches. Lila reached the bridge first, its planks groaning under her weight. Mara followed, rifle slung tight, her breath visible in sharp puffs. Jonah brought up the rear, his crowbar clanging against the rail as he stumbled. The bridge swayed, but it held. On the other side, the woman waited, crouched beside a moss-covered boulder. Up close, she was younger than Lila, expected mid-20s, maybe for face sharp and pale beneath the scarf, a faint bruise blooming along her cheekbone. "You're insane to follow me," the woman said, her tone dry but edged with fear. "But you're here, so listen." She lifted the key from around her neck, its silver twin to theirs glinting dully. "This opens the last lock. Theo's stash isn't just money, it's proof. Names, dates, accounts. He didn't just steal. He documented who he stole from. That's why they want us dead." "Who's they?" Mara demanded, her rifle half raised. "And who are you?" "Call me Elise," the woman said, ignoring the first question. "I was with Theo before he went dark. He gave me this and told me to find you two if things went south. Guess what? They did." Lila's stomach twisted. "You knew him? What was he to you?" Elise's gaze faltered, a flicker of something raw grief, maybe crossing her face. "Doesn't matter now. What matters is the vault. It's under the old mill, north of here. 3 keys, 1 door. We get there. We get the truth and maybe a way to bargain our lives." Jonah stepped forward, his voice low. "And if it's a trap, you show up out of nowhere with a story and a key. How do we know you're not leading us to them?" Elise met his stare, unflinching. "You don't. But those lights," she nodded toward the beams, now sweeping the bridge they'd crossed, "aren't asking questions. They're shooting first. Your call." A crack split the night a rifle shot, splintering the bridge's railing. Lila ducked instinctively, her heart slamming against her ribs. Mara cursed, shoving Elise behind the boulder as another shot whizzed past, embedding in a tree. The beams converged, 4 figures emerging from the mist, 3 men and a woman, all armed, their movements precise. The broad-shouldered collector led them, his rifle steady, his face obscured by shadow. "Run!" Mara barked, firing a warning shot into the air. The sound reverberated, buying them seconds as the hunters scattered for cover. The 4 of them bolted, Elise leading now, her pace relentless. The old mill loomed in the distance, a hulking silhouette against the storm clouds, a relic of Hollow Pine's logging days, its walls sagging under decades of neglect. They reached it as rain began to fall, fat drops drumming on the tin roof. The entrance was a gaping maw, its doors long rotted away. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust, and the faint echo of machinery long silent. Elise guided them to a trapdoor in the floor, its edges rusted but intact. 3 keyholes gleamed in the dim light, set in a triangle. "No time to argue," Elise said, slotting her key in. Lila and Mara followed, their hands shaking as the locks clicked in unison. The trapdoor groaned open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. A faint hum rose from bellow electricity maybe, or something alive. Mara went first, rifle ready. Elise followed, then Lila. Jonah hesitated, peering back at the entrance. "They're too close," he muttered, but he descended anyway, pulling the trapdoor shut behind him. The chamber below was a shock of modernity, concrete walls, fluorescent lights flickering to life, a steel vault door dominating the far end. A table held a laptop, its screen glowing with a login prompt, and beside it, a stack of files stamped with red ink. Classified. Theo's handiwork, meticulous and damning. Elise approached the vault, her fingers tracing its surface. This is it. Everything he took and everyone he burned. Before anyone could respond, a thud echoed above the trapdoor, rattling under heavy boots. Voices filtered down, muffled but insistent. "They're in there. Breach it." Jonah spun toward Lila, his eyes wild. "We're trapped. What now?" Mara checked her rifle, her jaw tight. We fight, or we open it and pray there's leverage inside. Elise typed furiously at the laptop, her hands trembling. There's a code. Theo left it for me. Give me a second. The trapdoor buckled, a crowbar prying at its hinges ironic, given Jonah's weapon. Lila's gaze darted between her companions. Mara, steely and ready. Elise, desperate and focused. Jonah, tense and unreadable. Doubt clawed at her again. 3 keys, 3 strangers, and a past she couldn't outrun. The trapdoor splintered, a beam of light stabbing down. A voice called out, calm and cold. End of the line, Carver. Hand it over, and you might walk away. Elise hit enter, and the vault door hissed, beginning to slide open. Inside, something glinted metal, paper, a fortune and secrets. But above, the collector's silhouette filled the gap, his rifle aimed straight at Lila's chest. The air in the underground chamber thickened with tension, the hum of the vault door's mechanism drowned out by the splintering crash of the trap door above. Lila stared up at the collector, his rifle a dark promise framed against the jagged hole. Rainwater dripped through, pooling on the concrete floor, reflecting the flickering fluorescent lights. His voice cut through again, smooth and lethal. Last chance, Carver. The keys, the vault, everything. Now. Lila's hand tightened around the photo in her pocket. Theo's red-inked, I found you, burning into her palm. Her eyes flicked to the vault, its door now fully open, revealing a steel-lined chamber. Inside, stacks of cash sat beside hard drives and a ledger Theo's meticulous record of betrayal. 10 million in dirty money, yes, but also names, dates, transactions, a blackmailer's gold mine. The glint she'd seen was a gun, sleek and loaded, resting atop the pile like a taunt. Mara shifted beside her, rifle raised, her finger hovering over the trigger. We're not handing over shit, she growled, but her voice wavered 4 against 1. Wasn't a fight she could win. Elise froze at the laptop, her screen flashing access granted, while Jonah edged closer to Lila, his crowbar dangling, his breathing uneven. No one's walking away unless I say so, the collector replied, descending the ladder with deliberate steps. His face came into viewward lines. Gray eyes, a scar slicing his brow. Behind him, 2 more figures followed, weapons drawn, their movements synchronized. The woman from the bridge stayed above, her flashlight beam pinning them in place.